Welcome, friends of the Greasy Shop Rag. Today we're going to take a look at Husqvarna 125b handheld blower. We're going to walk through a fuel line replacement. Now this isn't a very hard job, but being a homeowner piece of equipment, like many other pieces of homeowner equipment, it suffers from fuel related problems. They don't get used often enough, fuel gets old, fuel components get soft or brittle, and they need replacement. And this particular unit, while it looks like they were trying to do the maintenance, they actually had the air filter on backwards. Now, that's not a huge problem, but it does tell me that they've been in here. They tried to fix it. They couldn't. That's why it's on my bench. And we're going to take a look at what might be going on here. Now you noticed when I was hitting the primer bulb, it wasn't priming up. And I guess the big reason for that would be that fuel line that's hanging out there. Not connected to anything. So repairing this particular situation, it's pretty easy because the fuel lines and the grommet and the filter are all part of a kit. To access the carburetor and to make this job much easier, we have to take the side cover off. Now I know that can seem a bit intimidating for people that put air filters in backwards. It's not that big a job. There's 4 screws on the starter and there's 3 screws on the rest of the cover. These 3 screws are coarse thread. The 4 screws on the starter were fine thread. So keep them separate. Don't get them mixed up. Off comes the cover. You also notice that the guard around the muffler came off. Here's our trigger. It's just slipped over a shaft and then the end of the rod is pushed into the carburetor. If you lay it on the bench like this, orientation for putting it together is pretty simple. This fuel line goes to the primer bulb. We'll just remove it from the carburetor. Pull the carburetor right off. You'll notice there's a gasket on the carburetor between it and the intake. And we'll take the remaining fuel line off the carburetor. Now we have a tank grommet. And you'll notice that on that tank grommet, the black piece that the fuel lines run through, there's a little tab on it. And you can see it's pointing, well in this picture, let's say it's pointing towards 1 o'clock. We're going to pop that grommet out, not worrying about poking it or wrecking it because we're not going to reuse it. Now, it came out without a fuel filter, so that filter is still laying in the tank. We're going to go fishing here and see if we can get it out of there. I must have been using the wrong bait because I didn't catch anything. There we go. That is not a factory original fuel filter. So this unit was... the lines have been replaced once already. Now here's your part number for your Husqvarna fuel line kit, and you'll see that we have a filter, all the hoses, rubber grommet, and a primer. This is a very quick and easy fix to any fuel line problems with this unit, and also the 125bv. So you notice they're talking about that little tab I pointed out. That tab right there. Now they want it facing the other direction. And the idea of that is to get the line that goes to the carburetor close enough to the carb. And you also have to take into consideration the fuel filter and make sure that that line is laying somewhere in the bottom of the tank and not sneaking up toward the filler neck and out of the top of the level of the fuel. Now this part here, it can be a little difficult. the grommet fits in really snug, and you'll want to try and work it in without cutting it. Don't use sharp tools. Don't use a sharp screwdriver. And possibly you want to use some kind of lubrication on it. There are rubber specific products for doing this. Silicone, whatever. Something that's not going to eat on the rubber. And that might help put it in there a little bit. You can see I'm still struggling with this. And I didn't edit any of this out of the video because I wanted to point out that that thing fits in there snug and you're going to fight it a little bit. So don't get frustrated trying to install this. And be careful not to poke any holes in the rubber. Now after all that fighting, you can see that I didn't quite get the tab where the instructions wanted me to put it. But I'll still be able to sleep tonight. It'll be fine. As long as that rubber hose reaches the carburetor. I should say vinyl. It's not really rubber. These things are really tough and durable. But as long as it reaches the carburetor and the fuel filter is under the level of the fuel and laying on the bottom, then we're good. So we're going to slide the carburetor back over the studs and then try and push this line onto the bottom fitting of the carburetor. And here's another point where I could have edited the video and made myself look like a hero, but it goes on there tough, Now you'll notice right now the line has got a little bit of a kink in it if it were to stay in that position. But it won't. Once we push it farther onto the fitting and then slide the carburetor all the way back on the studs, that hose will have a nice gentle bend to it. And I only say that because I want you to inspect it afterwards. Now, it didn't go on there. So I have this special tool I use for kind of relaxing the end of a hose, softening it up, making it more pliable and easier to push on to a fitting. Other tools that might work would be a tapered punch, a golf tee, whatever. Maybe even some heat. But we just kind of loosened up the end of that hose, and now we're going to push it on. You want to be careful not to pinch the hose so hard that you actually crack it or put a hole in it. But having said that, you still got to grab it pretty hard with the pliers to push it on. And maybe a little bit of lubricant would have helped this as well. So there's only one other fitting on the carb, and there's only one other loose hose in this kit. So it's kind of a no-brainer. The short hose went to the bottom of the carburetor, and the long hose goes to the top. The lines are already on the primer bulb, so figuring out which one sucks and which one pulls fuel, you don't have to worry about it at all. This one we can push on by hand. It's easier to get to. So we have our old primer bulb in the air filter base. And there's just a couple of little tabs on the back of it. If we pop them tabs off of there, that primer bulb will come right out. It could be pried out from the front as well. You'll notice that there's no gasket between the carb and air filter base. There's supposed to be one. The last time this was repaired, they left it out for whatever reason. There's one pictured on the illustration parts list on the official Husky dealer webpage, but it doesn't have a part number. So I couldn't order one for this repair anyway. And being between the carb and the base, we're probably okay. Well, it looks like the primer bulb works and fuel is moving through that line. It's nice that they're clear and that you can see the fuel movement. So we've got a couple of nuts. These require an 8mm socket, and they're shouldered. So when you set it in the end of the socket, it'll hold it there, and it makes it pretty easy to install. If you can find them on your messy bench. So we'll snug these down. And you know, that's pretty much it for the fuel line portion of this. Here's our throttle trigger. We just drop the rod into the hole here and orient the trigger in the proper direction and push it over to post. That's all it does right there. Now we got to put the side covers back on. The muffler guard, there's a tab on the bottom side that it snaps. It doesn't really snap, but it kind of catches behind the tab. You got to get the cover lined up over the studs for the starter, but you also have to get it lined up on this little plastic boot on the switch. Make sure that that's oriented properly. It's obvious if it's not right because that boot will be hanging out. Our 3 coarse screws go in the top handle. And remember, these things are just plastic, so don't get carried away and strip them out. The 4 fine screws will be used for the starter. Make sure it's flush before you crank the screws down. And once we get this tightened down, we'll give it a test run. You'll hear that it doesn't run just right, and I'll eventually have to make a carburetor adjustment. But that's all I really have for the fuel line replacement on a Husqvarna 125b handheld blower. Thanks for watching. Later.